They stopped talking. Not all at once. It wasn't a single fight or a single moment you can point to and say, that's where it changed. It happened the way the tide goes out, gradually, then completely. The answers got shorter. The stories from the day stopped arriving at the dinner table. The texts came back with one word where there used to be paragraphs, and now you sit across from them and you have the specific hollow feeling of being next to someone who has decided, for reasons you don't fully understand, to be somewhere else while their body stays in the room. You have a word for what you see. Moody, distant, difficult, teenage. You tell yourself it is a phase, that they will come back eventually. That pushing harder will help, or that backing off will help, and you try both and neither works and the silence deepens. Here is what most people don't realize. The silence is not the absence of communication. It is the most specific, precise, and urgent communication they know how to send. It has a grammar, it has degrees, it has a meaning that changes depending on how long it has been going and what happened in the conversation before it started. And if you learn to read it, you will understand things about the person in front of you that they have never been able to say out loud, because the silence is always saying something, you just have not been taught to listen to it in the right direction. Here is the neuroscience of what is actually happening when they go quiet. Dr. Stephen Porges, the neuroscientist who developed polyvagal theory, identified 3 distinct states of the autonomic nervous system. The first is the ventral vagal state, the state of social engagement where a person feels safe enough to connect, communicate, and be fully present. The second is the sympathetic state, the fight or flight response, where the system perceives a threat and mobilizes for defense. The third, and most important for understanding Gen Z silence, is the dorsal vagal state, the oldest evolutionary response, sometimes called the freeze or shutdown response, where the nervous system, overwhelmed beyond what fight or flight can handle, simply goes offline. When your Gen Z person goes quiet, they are not choosing to be difficult. Their nervous system has shifted state, and the state it has shifted into is one that physically reduces verbal output, narrows emotional availability, and creates what looks from the outside like indifference or sullenness, but is, from the inside, a kind of protective dimming. The lights go lower, the connections between the emotional brain and the language brain thin, and communication becomes, neurologically, genuinely harder. The worst possible response to a person in a dorsal vagal shutdown is to demand they come back online immediately. To push, to escalate, to interpret the shutdown as disrespect and respond to it with frustration. Because the nervous system's first condition for returning to the ventral vagal state of social engagement is physical and emotional safety. And frustration, pressure, or escalation is the exact opposite of that signal. The silence will not be argued away. It will only lift when the nervous system receives sufficient evidence that the environment is safe enough to return to. Now here is what the silence actually means, because there are 6 distinct types and they are not the same. The first silence, the one-word answer. Quote, 0. Quote, 1, quote, 2, quote, 3, quote, 4, quote, 5. This is not the deep withdrawal. This is the surface silence, the first layer, and it is the one most people respond to incorrectly. It is not a wall, it is a door with a heavy handle. The person behind it is still present, still available, but running at a cognitive and emotional load that makes the full response feel like too much output for the available energy. Their nervous system is saying, I am here, but I am at capacity, and I do not have enough remaining bandwidth to give you the full version right now. The one-word answer is not rejection. It is a conserved response from a depleted system. The correct move is not to push for more words. It is to reduce the demand, to sit down next to them, to not require a performance of wellness, to let the silence breathe for a few minutes without filling it or fixing it. Often, within 10 minutes of feeling genuinely unhurried, the words begin to arrive on their own. The second silence, the physical retreat. They go to their room, the door closes, not slammed, just closed, and it stays closed longer than usual. This silence has a physical dimension, and that dimension is important data. The bedroom is, for most Gen Z individuals, the only space in their environment over which they have genuine autonomy. Research in environmental psychology confirms that perceived control over one's immediate environment is a direct modulator of cortisol levels. When the nervous system is overwhelmed, the brain seeks the environment where regulation is most possible. For Gen Z, that is almost always their room. The retreat is not abandonment of the relationship, it is regulation behavior. They are going to the place where their nervous system can begin to come back online without external demands or audience. The mistake is to follow them immediately and require interaction before the regulation is complete. The correct move is to give the retreat its time, and then, 20 or 30 minutes later, to knock softly and ask a single question with no agenda. Do you need anything? Not, we need to talk. Not, you can't just shut down like this. Not, I'm right out here when you're ready to be reasonable. Just, do you need anything? It leaves the door open without forcing it. The third silence, the averted eyes. They stop making eye contact. In conversations, they look at the table, at their hands, at the middle distance somewhere to your left. Eye contact is one of the most neurologically demanding forms of human connection. It activates the social engagement system fully, requiring the person to be fully present to both the content of what is being said and the emotional state of the person saying it. When eye contact becomes difficult, it is usually one of two things: shame or fear. Shame because they believe they have failed something, that your eyes will confirm the failure if they look into them. Or fear because the emotional content of the moment is more than the ventral vagal state can comfortably hold while also maintaining eye contact. Both states require the same response: a reduction of intensity, softer tone, more physical distance, less direct confrontation. Meeting averted eyes with the demand to look at you is one of the most reliable ways to escalate the shutdown. It communicates that the priority is your need for eye contact, rather than their ability to be present in the conversation. The relationship moves backward. The fourth silence, the delayed response. The message sits on read for 3 hours. The email comes back the next morning. The question asked at dinner is answered at breakfast. Science has now confirmed that for the Gen Z nervous system, response delay in written communication is not avoidance. It is emotional processing time. Research in communication psychology distinguishes between reactive communication, responding immediately from the emotional state activated by the message, and regulated communication, responding from a processed state where the emotional charge has been integrated. Gen Z, who grew up understanding the psychological cost of reactive communication in the public arena of social media, is deeply attuned to the difference. The delayed response is often the most considered, most accurate, and most emotionally honest response available to them. The immediate response would have been the reactive one. The delay is the processing work. When you express frustration about the delay, you are training them that the reactive response is what you prefer, that it is better for them to give you something fast and unprocessed than something accurate and considered. This is the opposite of what most relationships need. The fifth silence, the agreement. That isn't. They nod. They say, okay. They agree with everything you say in the conversation and then do none of it. Or they appear to accept your perspective and then behave in a way that makes it clear nothing you said landed. This is the silence of learned helplessness. Psychologist Martin Seligman defined learned helplessness as the behavioral state produced when an organism has learned through repeated experience that its responses have no effect on the outcomes it experiences. When a young person has brought their real perspective to enough conversations and had it dismissed, overridden, or redirected. Without genuine consideration, the nervous system stops generating authentic responses, not from deception, from efficiency. It has learned that authentic response is not a variable that changes the outcome, so it produces the least resistance response, agreement, while the actual self goes somewhere else. This silence is the most dangerous one because it is the quietest and the easiest to mistake for compliance. It is not compliance. It is disconnection wearing the costume of compliance. The sixth, silence. The complete disappearance. The texts stop, the check-ins stop, the physical presence in shared spaces stops. They are in the house, but they are not available to the house. This is the silence after the other five have gone unheard for long enough. Clinical psychologist John Gottman's research on relationship disengagement identified this final stage as the equivalent of what he calls stonewalling, the point at which the emotional bank account of the relationship has been overdrawn consistently enough that the nervous system can no longer afford to attempt connection. The investment required to try is greater than any return the system has been trained to expect. This silence is not the end, but it is close to the end of the window in which the work of repair is easy. It requires something more than a gentle knock on the door. It requires a sustained, deliberate, and patient demonstration that the environment has genuinely changed. Not a single good conversation. A pattern. Here is the thing about all 6 of these silences. They share a common root. They are all answers to the same underlying question, asked by a nervous system that has not yet found a satisfactory answer. Is this a safe enough space to bring the thing I actually need to say? The silence grows in the gap between what they need to say and their certainty that saying it will be received well. Close that gap, not by demanding they fill it with words, but by demonstrating consistently that you can hold what's in it. And you will find that Gen Z is one of the most verbally rich, emotionally articulate, and communicatively precise generations ever produced. They are not silent because they have nothing to say. They are silent because they are waiting for a level of safety that most environments have not yet offered them. Become that environment, one quiet, unhurried, non-reactive interaction at a time. The words will come. They always do when the room is safe